Let's talk conflict.
Okay.
You have written a book,
Yeah.
Managing Sports Conflict,
Yeah.
and you introduced tools how to manage them.
Yeah.
Would they only apply to sports or to real life and all the relationships we have and even ourselves?
Yeah. They're universal. They're universal concepts. I've put them in the frame of sports because there's a big gap. I mean, sports is my background. It's been a part of my life, my whole life. And I mean, I got so again, talking about failure and growing from it. I about I don't know, probably my ninth year at Lipscomb, somewhere in there. I lose track of which year. I faced a big, huge conflict with my team within a part of my team, and usually things get resolved, or at least I thought things got resolved. Understanding conflict management, I understand there are a lot of things that I thought were resolved probably weren't resolved as well as they could have been, but neither here nor there. To my perception, I'd always been able to handle every conflict, and this one I didn't. And there was some leadership that made some pretty bad decisions that betrayed trust and made the conflict worse. And I just found myself in this whole thing of like, holy moly, I don't know what to do. I don't like that. I like to know what to do. I don't have the skill set. I don't have the knowledge to understand how to deal with this large conflict. And so that's why it just so happened that Lipscomb had a conflict management master's degree. And so I was like, well, I'm working 60, 80 hours a week coaching, but I think this is that important. So I'm going to get that master's degree. And so, but yeah, so that's what inspired me. Again, failure inspired me to get a master's degree in conflict management so that I wouldn't have to have that type of situation. It was amazing, amazing learning. And yes, so the concepts, that's where I gleaned the concepts. So those are what are in the book, and they're universal. And of course, the conflict management master's program had nothing to do with sports, but I also realized that there's nothing in the world of sports that I know of to help sports people with conflict. And it just so happens there's a lot of conflict in sports. Of course, there's a lot of conflict in all of life, but sports is very emotional. Emotion is a really big driver for conflict. So, so I wanted to address that and kind of have that as I could blend my two worlds together and hopefully help people in the sports world, but not exclusively the sports world. So yeah, the 5 key factors that I focus on are the tools. Those are universal for sure.
That's very interesting. I wanted to ask you whether in sports and among athletes we see a lot of emotions as well as we see in real life. I
Yeah.
always had this understanding that their world is everything is super under control and the emotions have to be regulated and set aside. Is that a misconception?
I think it's well, I mean, first of all, emotions are real. So you can't, I mean,
We are humans.
we're humans.
Yes.
So, and they're not bad per se. I mean, some can be. Some emotions are almost entirely negative, but most emotions are left to be defined depending on what you do with them. No, sports is highly emotional. There's so much, and I kind of talk about this in the book, especially these days, maybe less so, I don't know, 40 years ago, but we're talking about so much money, so much visibility, so much, I mean, you literally can see little league games on YouTube or, I mean, there's nothing hidden in sports, and people have strong opinions and strong feelings, and parents think that their kids are going to be the next, full ride NIL rich athlete or pro, or, there's just so much pressure on sports now. It's pretty unique in the level of pressure and visibility. I kind of write, Bob in accounting isn't probably being analyzed every day, but some little kid is being judged on TV, on ESPN 3 or on YouTube for how they're playing a game. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of emotion. Parent emotion has gone up. Parent conflict has gone up pretty dramatically. It's pretty remarkable how often I turn on the TV. I actually try not to watch the news very often, to be honest with you. I don't see a lot of value in it. I like to keep up to date on generally what's going on, but I try not to be influenced by because that's a lot of emotional control being used by the news, even. But I am amazed at how often I turn on something and see a parent brawl at a game or, a parent attacking an umpire or a coach and sometimes people die, that's how, that's how much they let the emotion go. I mean, it's absolutely crazy, but that's what happens in emotion. And yes, the long answer is, sports is very emotional. You're right, though. But I think this is true in anything. We should strive to have control over our emotions. We're not Spock, we're not a Vulcan or something where we can eliminate emotion. But if you let, I think a big chunk of our society right now, I mean, we have such huge divides in our country. Well, that why? Yeah, differences of opinions. I think in most cases, people want the same things, actually. They just see it differently. And instead of bringing people together and working through, both sides have whipped up the emotion. High emotion means you can't think. You can't be logical when you're highly emotional. If you can't be logical, you can't solve problems. So it's perfect. And it's really what's sad is, in my opinion, it's powers that be that use emotion to whip up people's emotion so they can control people. The more emotional and illogical people are, the more they can be used. And it's sad because people are letting it happen. Of course, they don't know it's happening. And we're so busy, we get, just these little blips. So we're susceptible to be influenced by all kinds of different sources that may or may not be worthy of our trust. So that kind of went a long ways there.
No, that actually makes sense because this is very interesting. You said that we don't know not to get engaged when I'm going to paraphrase,
Okay.
something triggers us
Hmm.
and we just go with all the emotions that will appear,
Yeah.
right? Get triggered basically. And we don't know how to control it. And then all our answers are going to be based on that emotion that
Right.
came out of that situation or trigger.
Yeah.
How one can stay aware during the high stakes situations
Hmm.
and still deal with the conflict that has appeared without losing their logic. How
Yeah.
do you even find your logic in the midst of chaos?
I mean, so part of it is, being self-aware, which is not easy to do. It's helpful when you have other people that can kind of help guide you, but it's having a plan. So in the book about on emotion is the first tool I address because I think it's the most important. I feel like you could learn every other tool, every other skill in conflict management. And if you can't manage your own emotion, if you can't influence the emotion of others, all those other skills are worthless. So I took my favorite class in my master's program was it was called Conflict and Communications, and it was taught by Dr. Jeff Thompson, who was a New York Police Department detective, crisis negotiator. So he negotiated with hostage situations
Mm.
and suicide type situations, high conflict, high emotion, and so he came to class and I think right off the bat, kind of talk to us about what do you think we do when we get to the scene, with the New York Police Department when there's a crisis, when somebody's being held, hostage, or we're like, oh, try to resolve it, right? Try to get them out of it. If there's a bad guy, you try to get him. He's like, we don't do that. our number one goal, as long as it's stable, our number one goal is to reduce emotion. We will take as much time as long as it takes, as long as things are still relatively safe. All we are working on is establishing rapport, building trust, bringing emotion down. Because his quote, no, nothing good happens in high emotion. In high emotion, the person's likely to do something they would regret, something that they would never do in their logical state. They're not able to think straight. So the New York Police Department, all they care about at first is bringing that emotion down. Then they work to resolve it. Because when you get to logic, then you can start talking. Well, do you really want to do something like this? If think about what this would do to your life or their life. Or now they can think. Up here, they're like they've been wrong, they're hurt, they're whatever the emotions are, and you need to name those emotions to be able to deal with them. So that's to me, that's a huge example. It was awesome, and I think the whole class was like, oh, because I don't know, I just thought you jump in and try and save the day. You don't
Mhm.
work on talking and giving logic and listening and letting the person kind of speak so that they can get it out of their system and helping them to understand where you can understand why they're feeling this way. So there's a whole toolkit. I probably barely touched the surface really realistically in the book because I'm trying to hit five tools, but this is the start of it. So yeah.
Can we dive even deeper into this
Okay.
conversation? Because we deal with this stuff on a daily basis, in
Mm,
real life. We don't have to be athletes to deal with emotions and conflict and, in our day in the life that we are living now, like war everywhere,
mhm,
conflict everywhere.
yep.
And how one can so let's imagine that we are at the comfort of our own home
Mhm.
and nothing, we haven't even gone out to deal with the world. How do you mentally prepare yourself in order to be able to face whatever that is going to happen to you that you are not aware of?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I'm sure it's different for each person, but I think, it's more about probably not how you set yourself up to leave the house on the day and more about how you build yourself as a person to begin with, what your perspective is, how again, self esteem, what you believe is possible, who you believe you are. Are you trying to prove things to other people and running yourself into the ground, for it? Well, you're not going to be in a good state of mind, to be able to deal with other things if you can't even deal with the stuff you're dealing with because the stuff you're dealing with isn't even reasonable. So I think that probably and this I'm just thinking on the fly on this, but I mean I think at the base of it, a lot of it is who are you, and are you comfortable with who you are and with your place, and that's not to say you're comfortable and like satisfied with this is where I am and I'm never going to grow, or I mean, more comfortable with who you are, and in response to the reality of our existence, are you comfortable with that enough to be able to have the standards by which you go out? Are you triggered, kind of back to in your room, in your own house, you still can be triggered by the rest of the world because it's on social media and TV and it's everywhere. It's pounding us from every source. I mean, I read stuff and it's like, well, I already know that's not true, right? But I'd have a friend texting me stuff like, "Look at this! Oh my goodness!" You know, and I'd be like, "That's not true. Look, just a little research into that, and you'll find out that what you're so mad about was meant to make you mad, and it wasn't based on anything. There's plenty to be upset about in the world. There's plenty of wrong out there. We don't need the extra, but the extra is how. Again, I hate to be conspiratorial, but it's not really conspiracy. The people of, leadership, people in power have sought to control people since time began. So that's not a conspiracy. That's how some humans choose to work. And people in power sometimes use that power incorrectly and will do anything to keep themselves in power. So we have to be aware of that. And I don't know, just try to center ourselves, ground ourselves. Again, I, I, I do try to avoid news, which is
That's very wise.
it's unfortunate, right? Because you want, I mean, there's value in being informed, but if it's just being poured with propaganda and stuff, you just like, what am I getting from this? It's just making me upset. I have my life to live. Most of that stuff doesn't technically affect my day unless I let it.
And you cannot really do anything about most of them either.
And if you can, do something, but if you can't, don't work yourself up on something you don't have any control over. I mean, that's focusing on what you have control over versus, that circle of control versus, I forgot how the terms go, but if you spend your time out here in the things that you don't have control over, you're wasting a lot of energy and making things a lot worse for yourself. So yes, focus on your world, make yourself better. If you make yourself better, the world's going to be better. Is that a big statement?
No,
But I don't think so, because if each person does that, it takes care of itself to a certain extent.
absolutely, for sure. How can one understand their own emotions on regulate?
Wow.
Because something happens and you go,
Yeah.
"Whoa," and you just explode, and you don't after you're like, "What just happened? Why I reacted that way?" There are things that you can do in order to prevent that.
I don't know if there's things you can do to prevent other than what we talked about, right? So I would consider it a type of failure if you let your emotions get the best of you. But as we talked about, it's not failure if you learn from it and grow from it. So, and it doesn't mean, we're humans are really hard at changing. We need change, but we hate change. And just the way we're designed, we like a certain rhythm. Our brain likes a certain rhythm. Our subconscious kind of likes to know what it needs to set up for us. So to make change, you have to be intentional about it, which means you're not going, again, it's really rare. If I want to change a habit, or if I want to change how I react to emotion or be aware of my emotion, I need to start by being like catching it. Probably too late, right? Oh, I let that go too far. But then next time you're a little better, and the next time you're a little better. I don't I don't see people very often just change everything. I'm just different, completely different. It happens kinda, but most people are going to fail on the way to getting better, and they have to accept that, and they have to judge it more by, did I catch it quicker? Did I do it? Did I not get as bad as I was last time? And give themselves some grace, not an excuse, not an out, but some grace to say, I'm on my way. I'm on the journey. I'm heading in the right direction. I'm getting better. And ultimately, I will be light years better than I ever was before. And it's going to help me and it's going to help others. But I just, we want quick fixes to everything, but we're not designed that way. And then we're down on ourselves and people quit. That's why people quit things so quickly, right? Didn't all just magically change for me. So it's not worth it. I can't do it. Well, no, it's going to take some time and you got to give yourself grace. And so, yeah.
How do you know when it's time to stay and fight for some, and by fight, I don't mean negative fight, good
Hmm.
fight,
Yeah.
for something to resolve, something to grow and evolve versus let go and let things take care of themselves?
I think that's up to each person. And I'll put it in the context as a coach, for example. So my world was running, right? And so I want people to be fast runners and I want to help them to be amazingly fast runners. And we want to win national championships and all these things. It doesn't matter how talented an athlete was for me. If I felt like they didn't want to be running, I fully supported them not running. I think those things are all individual. Running isn't anything. I put a lot of my life into it. So what? It's not for the running. And in the scope of the universe, whether you run fast or don't run fast, or whether you win a spelling bee or don't win a spelling bee, or whatever it is, those things aren't important in and of themselves. So, so I think that drive or whatever, is individual and is up to the individual. It's for them to determine. And then y- hopefully they get into the environment or get the resources that help them to grow in that area. Does that did that make sense?
Yes, yes. So how do you deal with somebody who's not agreeing with you in
Yeah.
a professional setting that you need to achieve certain goals for the
Yeah.
purpose of the good, for the good of the whole establishment
Yeah.
or the whole team, but there are people who disagree with you and they
Yeah.
don't. So what is the goal? The goal is to change their minds, or the goal is to come into an understanding of how everybody's feeling. How do you manage these kind of
Yeah.
situation?
I wouldn't think of it in terms of the goal is to change their minds per se. And in fact, I think it would be best to go into any conflict or any disagreement. I mean, it's for sure the best with curiosity as well as. So I could be right. Maybe I'm right. I don't know, but I'd love to think I had all the knowledge in the universe. I don't. I don't have a fraction of it, and neither does the person over there, but they have different aspects of it. And so I tend to think, a lot of the tools, bringing emotion down, that allows people to get to a place where they can work in logic. The second tool is about communication. Communication is being able to hear is more than even talk. I mean, the most important part of communication is listening. And we tend to, I thought I was a great listener. I had some of my athletes, you're not listening to me. Oh, yes, I am. Well, then I take conflict management and I learn more about active listening skills. And I kind of like, well, maybe I wasn't as good a listener as I thought I was. But listening is critical. You're going to learn, maybe you won't agree with the person at the end of the day, but at least you'll know where they're coming from. You'll understand what their logic is. And if they're not using logic, maybe you can get them to move. But if your goal is to get them to think like you do, we'd call that a win-win or win-lose kind of philosophy of dealing with people. And win-lose almost always is lose. It's fine to go about that way. You have to believe like me. If you don't care about the relationship, if you don't need the relationship, well, then conflict is kind of one way, or can be. Shouldn't be probably, but can be. War, right? My only goal is to crush you so that I win. Well, we see how that works, right? That works with a lot of destruction on everybody. Everybody loses, but one side thinks they won. And there are times, I guess, where that is necessary. Hopefully, very rarely, but those do exist because of greater evil or whatever. Most of the time, the approach should be win-win, where you're trying to find mutual solutions. It doesn't mean you have to agree with everything at the end of the day. It does mean you are seeking to understand. Through understanding, sometimes you learn some things you didn't think about before that make you a better person. And what the goal should be is to come up with the best resolution possible. People are involved, people are unpredictable, people don't always do what's in their own best interest. So you can't guarantee a positive conflict resolution. But if you use the right tools and approach it the right way, you have a very good chance at getting there. And again, that doesn't mean at the end of the day, even with an agreement, that everybody agrees, but they are agreeing to the agreement and feeling good about it because it's the best for everybody.
Right.